Flyers fans, welcome to a live session, a special live session featuring Yariv, Wolok and Jamey Baskow from FlyersNittyGritty.com. This is a trade deadline preview. It's not a preview anymore. Can you believe it? Voila! The deadline came and went. It was that fast. That fast. Chuck Fletcher pulled off miraculous stuff today. It was fantastic what he did. He did exactly what he said he was going to do about a month ago, but that's here nor there. Yariv and I will get into that later. And let's welcome Yariv to the show. Yariv, he is a fantastic YouTube specialist. He writes good content for the site and does great videos, and you all should give him a follow at Wolok. And let's introduce him first. Hello, Yariv.
Thanks, buddy. Yeah, thanks, buddy. So that was a pretty exciting day, actually. Not so much for the Flyers, but I think in the right kind of ways it was exciting. And I think in general, Flyers just have different things going on, than the trade deadline. And I think for a lot of people that might be a little bit of a rude awakening as to where they think this team is. I don't think this team was, thinking the same thing as maybe a lot of the media or maybe a lot of the fan base wanted them to go. I think they went a far more conservative way. And I think, something you and I have definitely talked about and definitely, discussed. And I think for sure we saw this coming, at least to some degree. Maybe not these exact players, but we definitely, weren't too far off for sure. Yeah.
Did Chuck Fletcher rip his shirt off like Hulk Hogan does to his fan base, the Hulkamaniacs? Did he do that today or not?
Yeah.
I mean, it was great. I mean, the guy hit on every note, I believe, anyway. And you know what? For this trade deadline, what would you give him a grade of?
It's a good question, actually. It's interesting you said like on a lot of and on every note, right? Because he didn't do that much from a paper transaction, but I think it's a testament of what the Flyers really are. Is that they actually didn't need as much as most people think they do. I mean, part of their biggest thing is that they really need to get healthy, which unfortunately was kind of a year. We'll talk about it, where they had some key injuries, but overall, you didn't look at the team go, they desperately need certain positions. Really just needed the bottom 6 positions kind of filled out. And they're getting kind of a rotation of players in there. Now, with the organizational depth, I don't know, it kind of changes things. The plans are not the same as a team that's kind of fully maxed out with veterans. Maybe just want to add that one key guy of that key need position where they think their lineup is kind of perfect. The Flyers are kind of perfect in the sense where they have a lot of key pieces set up and maybe they're not developed fully, or just kind of entering that phase of producing at a high level. I think it's different than a lot of the other competitors. Obviously, somebody like Boston, who leads the NHL in points right now.
Right, and they picked up Ricci, who they need, who could bang with the best of them, and he could pot a big goal, But if you're looking up and down, like these prices were sky high, man. Like I'm talking about, being on a mountain in Alaska or something like that, and just falling down the cliff. I mean, good gosh, I mean the prices this year were just insane. I mean, Goudreau fetched a first, I mean, is that what you wanted, Chuck Fletcher to do? And that's, sort of the standpoint, like with the Flyers fans and stuff. And I understand, like some of them feel a little underwhelmed, and especially with Joel Farabee, going back to the AHL with the Phantoms and stuff. But, looking at it, if the Flyers were going to go after, Jean-Gabriel Pageau, look at it. I mean, he fetched the first, what could possibly be 2 firsts. Right. A second that has no conditions on a second, but a third can turn into I think it's a
if they win
third
the Stanley Cup.
If they win the Stanley Cup this year only, it turns into a second or a first? I forget.
I think it's a first. I think it's 2. I think it's 2 firsts and a second, and then if they win the Stanley Cup, which I mean, at that point,
could or could not happen. I mean,
care that much. Yeah, but again, they probably wouldn't listen. That's a bet worth making if you win the Stanley Cup to a degree. But it's a lot for a guy. Listen, they're probably going to get more out of Pageau than people expect. I mean, otherwise, I don't think Lamoriello would make that kind of deal. but it's a lot. I mean, they traded for him because they believed he was going to be a key part of their core. Like, they brought him in to play probably a second-line center. I mean, considering what they paid for him and what they got. At the very least, a third-line center that has a big role on the power play too and on the penalty kill. You know, it's kind of like what we paid for Kevin Hayes, or at least financially.
Oh, yeah.
Kevin Hayes a big contract, but thank God we didn't have to trade for him on top of that. It would have been more.
Oh, yeah. And Pageau, he could very well fetch the same amount as Kevin Hayes. Realistically, I mean, his numbers are there, and he does everything Kevin Hayes does. He plays the PK, like you said. He could play the power play, chip on the power play. He could be a threat on a penalty kill, too. He could go the other way. He's potted some shorties, too. But
I will say this. He's not 6'5". He's not 6'5".
Oh, well, that's true. He doesn't have the size.
Pounds.
Yeah.
That's
but and some pundits even had the Flyers interested in Pageau, and let's get to that, because I wanted to touch a little bit on that, because you could see some criticism from Flyers fans. I can't believe Fletcher didn't do this. I can't believe he didn't do this. I don't think he knows. Who knows if he inquired? I can tell you this, and I know full well, and you do too, from being around the team as well. There is no doubt in my mind Chuck Fletcher picked up that phone call, and called the Senators about Pageau. I mean, he's a good general manager. He's hit on every note in the offseason. He at least had some interest in Pageau, and I could see him now hanging up the phone as soon as they said, first round pick. See ya. In this deep draft where players could trickle into the second round like Bobby Brink did, and the Flyers, moved up, and Fletcher moved up and snagged him. Totally. The same thing could very well happen this year. So I give Fletcher.
Well, real quick, I don't want to on Pageau. No, I totally agree with what you're saying, but again, because they're not going to re-sign him, right? The Flyers wouldn't give him that kind of monster contract afterwards because we don't necessarily have the space.
That's true.
Keep Pageau.
Yeah, with Patrick, yeah, you're right. Yeah,
I know everybody thinks that's sensitive, but he is going to come back. Like, there is going to be a phase. It doesn't mean it's not always the end and doom and gloom. We talk about that all the time. There are bumps and bruises along the way. A lot of times, like, most careers are not perfect. Unfortunately, it is a battle. And I hope that Patrick can come back sooner rather than later. I think we both say that we, that's a big game changer. We talk about trade deadline. We both said it. That everybody said it. It's obviously a common theme. He is the biggest trade deadline acquisition, even with the 2 weeks that he would need, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. If he can get some games here at the end of the season, it doesn't matter. If he has any points during the year, if he has 10 games at the end of the season and he's looking pretty good, he gets better every game, that is still a big addition to us. You're talking about adding that to the bottom six at the very least. I mean, and he could continue to get better if we make a deep run. Like, he would have to get caught up to speed, but he's also extremely talented, and that should not be forgotten here. This is a former second overall pick. I know everybody thinks he's broken. He's not broken. They don't all develop extremely fast. Look at Sean Couturier today. We both talk about it all the time. Look at even Leon Draisaitl. If you look at his numbers, he didn't explode into the NHL like Connor McDavid did. He's a phenomenal player, but he took time to develop, and each step along the way, he kind of inched his way forward to greatness. It's very rare that they come in and just explode and, take over the league. There's always kind of, a learning path to some degree, always, and some more than others, but that doesn't necessarily maximize their ceiling, right? So with Patrick plus the two new centers that we added, and I know we kind of touched on that a little bit, but with the two new centers of Grant and Thompson, those are two sizable centers. If Patrick does come back, plus we talked about this, Morgan Frost is still in the minors. That is some center depth at this point that most teams in the league that cannot match, and it does not include Claude Giroux at center if we need him, or Raffle at center if we need him. And it's good. It's really good. We need guys who can play the middle. They can play defense. That's what we need. Yeah,
and that's it, because Alain Vigneault's system is a defensive first type system. Who he wants. Defensemen that can spring the puck, spring the offense, and carry in clean zone zone entries and zone exits. So these two players, Nate Thompson and Derek Grant, fit the bill. They were both defensive type first players, so it wasn't a shock by any means. And our site covered that, yesterday in terms of Derek Grant with a realistic trade article that came out. So we've been operating for the past month under the impression that the Flyers would only shore up the bottom six. Where this went, where all hell broke loose for the past few weeks with how the play is, that shouldn't dictate how they should move at the trade deadline. It should have always been, in terms of what Chuck Fletcher said about a month and a half ago when he addressed the media. He said he wasn't going to make any panic-type moves, and that, he would address, without trying to give up, the overall makeup of the team. He didn't want to, make conflicts in terms of the overall structure because he liked them. He liked the players. He liked the overall makeup of the team. So why make a panic move when you see the Pittsburgh Penguins, who are probably closer to a cup than us? Let's be honest. I mean, we had to be realistic here. Well, there were never we were not a cup contender coming into the season. So expectations shouldn't just rise at the trade deadline. That's my whole thing.
Oh, totally. But here, let me say something about the Penguins, though. I mean, I think something people need to realize this as well, and I do think I agree with your statement. Penguins are easy to point out because they obviously have two X factors, right? They have Crosby and Malkin that separates them from the league. Despite what any hater wants to say, it does. It separates you. You have that kind of talent in the middle. But overall, it shows that they have deficiencies as well. It's why these teams have to go out and make these trades. It's because you aren't that confident in your team. Even in Tampa Bay, you look at Tampa Bay. We look on paper, they are a phenomenal team. I mean, you didn't look at their team and say, "Wow, they have to go out and trade their first round pick this year to get Coleman, to get." You know what I mean? Like that. Nobody would have thought they had. You know what I mean? But they did that because. They did it because they want to make sure that everything's just locked up. Is that it doesn't matter if a good player sits. Is that everywhere, every single spot in the lineup, there's a good player. And the Flyers, I don't want to get cocky. I'm not saying that they're at a point that they're beyond Tampa Bay, but it shows that the Flyers do have a player in a competent position, every position. And you're right. We're not at the point of full-on contender mode. So we can't afford to start selling to shore up every spot. We'll be there, right? We'll be there very soon. But at this point, we're deep enough that we can compete already. So we don't need to go out and sell. We just needed to fill in a couple of those spots that were left by some unfortunate injuries this year, right? And they're not going to compare, but we're already good. So let's try to get even better. And if Patrick comes back, then we get even better. So it's all additions. Go ahead.
The one other thing I wanted to chime in before we head to the Metro or whatever, the overall makeup and stuff.
We should talk about Derek Grant and Nate Thompson specifically, but go ahead.
Oh yeah. But what I was saying is that this team has built in and they're emotionally invested based off the Oscar Lindblom situation and the Nolan Patrick situation. These are two types of very serious situations in terms of a migraine disorder because you just don't know, and your concern is the overall health of the individuals. Let's be honest, this is more than a sport. We're talking about people's lives here. So with Nolan Patrick feeling the way he is, and then all of a sudden in December, the news broke out. God, we pray every day, and I'm sure you do too. So I'm saying everybody as a whole, praying for Oscar Lindblom. In terms of his situation, I just think that these were the right decisions today off the trade deadline to not give up on any of these players because of all the emotions that have been flowing all year. This is a family. And they've acted like it, and they've acted professionally all year. And regardless of what people want to say or what people sometimes this adversity makes this team an even stronger one. And they didn't need to go out and get a Patrick Marleau, a Trocheck today, or a Vaughn.
Marlowe's a little different, right? Marleau was a really cheap acquisition.
I'm just using him as an example because of how he's been in the present.
Well, we would have loved Marleau, but I don't think he wanted to come here. I think he wanted to go to a contender, or he wasn't moving anywhere. Because it was a conditional pick, it was just. But I agree with you. Outside of that, Anyway, keep going. I derailed you. I wanted to talk about
you're fine. I just didn't want to give up, a player, and a player off this roster just for a rental. I'm happy that Chuck Fletcher stayed away. Looking at where I was getting at is looking at Pittsburgh and seeing what they were doing. Look at the Isles, and then notification came out that the Isles were close to a deal for Zach Parise, and then you look what Carolina did. And then
Carolina, I think is a mess, dude. I'll be honest with you. The more I think about it, it's a mess.
Like when you hear of a name, Trocheck, that could be like Chuck Fletcher's like, oh,
yeah, but what?
Well, I got to go.
Hold on, I got to stop you here for a second, because what's going on with the Carolina Hurricanes? They come into the season, they're already ready to go. They have this really deep defense. Everybody's super excited about them, which I thought, for one, I think the team itself is good. I think they lack a little bit of that top end punch that even teams like the Flyers have. I do think Carolina is good. I think Svechnikov is amazing. I think he's going to be an elite player for a long time. I think Aho is amazing, but I do think they lack some talent in some areas, and I think the moves they made are kind of clear. They had to trade a first and a second for Brady Shea. They brought on they traded Falk, and then they brought in new faces and switched people out, and then they signed Halla, and then they traded Halla out for Torchek, and I don't know if they're even going to be better after all these changes. And Walmart, dude, such a great point. I don't even know if they're going to be better after these moves, and I feel like that is majority of how the Carolina Hurricanes operate, and I'm not threatened by the moves they made.
And that's what I mean.
I disagree with them. Oh, Sammy Vatanen is the other one. And
that's what I'm saying. These were panic moves because you're looking around, and that's exactly the point I was trying to make in regards to Chuck Fletcher. He sees around him, and he's like, okay, well, you know what? I'm going to stand pat, and see what happens. It was great. I just like Chuck Fletcher when the wheels are falling, sort of. When you're hearing all these names go around saying, oh, Parise going here, the big names, Patrick Marleau used to be a big name. Oh, Patrick Marleau, damn, he went to the Penguins again. So, Sheary went to the Penguins, and
that
you're hearing
not surprising at all.
But I'm just saying, you're hearing all.
For nothing. It's so annoying. Not for nothing, but you know what I mean.
You're hearing all this stuff going around. It's easy for Chuck Fletcher to pick up, okay, you know what? That's it. I am going to give in. I'm going to go get I'm going to give up a first round pick. And, I'm just throwing a name out of the hat because it didn't happen. Minstikoff. That's it. I'm giving a first round pick for him, even though he was traded, before that. I'm just saying, using that as an example. I'm happy that Chuck Fletcher stayed pat, so to speak, after getting Derek Grant. What time was it? Like 11 o'clock, 11:15? So he had, close to 3 hours. Yeah, that's what I mean. That's what I'm saying. And you're hearing all.
Wanted. There's a plan. That's what all this shows. There is a plan.
That's exactly words out of my. That's exactly where I was getting at.
And let's hold on. Let's talk about these guys. Right? Let's talk about. I think we should talk about Derek Grant first, just because I think he's a little bit more exciting. Derek Grant, listen. We both looked at his numbers even over the past 2 years. We're going to get to know him. So quite frankly, we can ignore a lot of people's opinions. I mean, I think the opinion right now is he's a defensive forward with the ability to score. He's pretty big. He's about 6'3", slightly over 200. I think just under 220 pounds. It's a pretty big guy. He's going to be 40. Can play all three positions. Can play center. He has pretty good center numbers. He's left-handed. So he could slot in on the Kevin Hayes line. He could play Scott Lawton's role for a little bit. We don't know, but he's going to be extremely useful. And he could have a higher offensive punch. And I did say this to you earlier today. There is a chance from the pedigree, if it works out, Chuck Fletcher calls him an elite playmaker. When I hear that type of stuff, I think re-signing. I think this guy might be here for the next 2-3 years, and he might be a key PK guy, right? When you agree on that?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. And the good thing about him is that he could be used as a power play specialist, too. He could be used as a net front presence, and give the unit, exactly. Give the Flyers, that net front presence that they have at times have been lacking this year, and that's why the power play has been inconsistent. They've been. Yes. I will say this: the power play in general, overall, for the past 3 or 4 games, has looked far much better than it has, in the prior month or so. Right, it may not be finishing, but I like the overall puck movement on the power play in general. So I think Michel Terry and Lane Vigneault have done a good job in that. Exactly. Yep.
They gave it back to Giroux. Let's be honest. I don't know what they were waiting for, but they gave it back to the best, power play specialist in the league. just let him do his job, and everything will be okay.
Yeah,
they'll at least be competent in the position,
And the addition of Derek Grant, in a weird way, could actually help JVR in a sense to where JVR is looking back. Wow, okay, I got this guy on my heels now.
Well,
sort of like the same prototype players, and to where he could be used. Derek Grant could take JVR's spot on the power play now. So now JVR's sitting. Damn, I need to get my game. So I don't know.
And we were talking about this earlier. It's like I could see some people ripping it and being like, "This is like a Dale Weiss scenario." But right, you want to remember that
so
it's a center. Well, Dale Weiss had one really great year, and that's kind of how he earned his contract. Yeah. Which more that his contract was way too big. His value was okay, as far as like being an NHL fourth line player. His cost was way too high. He was worth like $1 million. In this case, obviously, Derek Grant, I think he's making under $1 million, right? It's like $700K. So he's definitely a steal, even at what he produced and even what you gave up for him. He's pretty much a steal for the year. I don't know if it's a steal, but, a fourth-round pick could turn out to be a decent player. But, the type of player you're getting in return here is essentially a fourth-round pick turnout type of guy. You can plot in 15 goals a year.
Who's essentially sort of like a Michael Raffle. Exactly. I mean, it's great. I mean, he doesn't pot any more goals than Michael Raffle does. He's at 14. Actually, he's beaten Raffle in goals now. Derek Grant comes in, and he's the sixth highest goal scorer on this team now.
Yeah, it's funny.
Isn't that crazy? So now, when you're looking at it, and it's like, damn, the Flyers actually did make a pretty solid acquisition.
And two years ago, I think he had 24 points, 12 goals, 12 assists.
Yeah, something like that.
And in less than 82 games. So that it was a pace of like 40 points, essentially, 30-some points. So it's pretty good, man. It's a pretty good player.
And it's pretty good for what they gave up,
exactly.
Dude. They had 2 fourth-rounders to give up. 2 fourths. Honestly, I was wrong in that in the article I wrote yesterday in terms of acquiring Derek Grant. I thought it would take Misha. And I said possibly a 6th or 7th. Exactly.
We gave up
Dude,
less.
It was a steal. I'm happy. 2 fourths. We had, Chuck Fletcher had 2 fourths coming into this draft. He gives up 1 more. Now that they still have a 4th, so it's great. And let's get to
Kev Vorobiev. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, and Kev, just in case, and they could, they could tender him at year's end. So. Yeah, that's what I mean. That's what I'm saying. You never know in terms of injuries, especially with center depth. How many years, years ago, the Flyers were struggling to find centers. You remember that? And isn't it great in this type of position? Like they have a center depth.
Let's talk about Nate Thompson for a second because that's another center, and we've been talking all year. We needed centers. I know that these guys aren't elite. I'm sure, elite's not even the ballpark we're talking about here. But again, look at how effective Scott Lawton, Pitlick, these guys can be highly effective, especially if the system is working. If the team is rolling as a solid unit, you can make average guys play highly effective hockey. Yes. And average doesn't mean bad. Average means he's an NHL player. It's hard to be an NHL player. If you were a consistent NHL player and you were competent, you could put up 30 points, you were part of a recipe of winning a championship. And that's what we need. Scott Lawton is a 40-point player, but he's a very good 40-point player. And we need players like that. If Derek Grant's like that, even better. I don't know if he is, but if he can turn into that, or even if he's 60% of that, we could use that right now.
And even Nate Thompson, when you're looking at it, he's a fourth-line center, right? He has 14 points, 4 goals, and 10 assists, coming into play tomorrow night against the Sharks. And he is the 4th seed. And he was the assistant captain in Montreal, right? When you're looking at it, 14 points is a solid point production for a fourth-line center when you're just looking at the overall totals. How can you expect a Connor Bunnaman, to come in? And I know Connor Bunnaman did well. Listen, I love the guy. I never want to give up on a prospect, and that's not what this is about. This is about going into the playoffs with some veteran experience, and just in case, because the Flyers have relied heavily on the youth throughout the whole season due to injuries, unfortunate injuries at that, and stuff. Bringing up Frost for when he obviously needed a little more time in the AHL.
And these guys are big, right? These guys are big and strong. They're bigger and stronger.
And they are producing for the amount, not only the amount of money, but the position that they're playing. Like Nate Thompson, you can't expect a Connor Bunnaman to go into the playoffs and be the same player because, like you said, in your trade deadline video on Friday on our channel. And for those viewers that don't know, Yariv did a great deadline trade video on our site, and I think that on this, on the YouTube channel, I think everybody should go and listen to that, because this is exactly what he was talking about. It's a playoff atmosphere. It's different. I mean, the fans are going nuts on every shift. The fans are going nuts.
Every play matters. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, your team's bringing the puck in the zone. The fans are going nuts. So on the other end, when you're away, what are the fans doing? They're going nuts when the opposition is coming into the Flyers zone.
And just the physicality too, right? Just the sheer physicality, how hard they hit ratchets up. Like, they're trying to injure each other, because it's all about making it to the end of the
7-game series.
Yeah, you're hitting through guys.
Outplay. And who knows if these prospects can do it. In the same token, who knows if they couldn't do it. And that's where,
if they can, great.
Of injury. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. If they can, great. Then beat out a veteran. Then great. Yep. Farabee should be forcing Nate Thompson to sit. You know what I mean? Where they're like, sorry, Nate, like, this kid's just too good. Like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, that's what we want to see. And, again, we were talking about the Penguins. The Penguins rotate players out. They have organizational depth. Everybody keeps saying, how the hell are they always competitive? It's because they were so bad for so long that they added so much youth within their core. Mario Lemieux kind of set the tone. This is what we started to do. This is what Hextall began. And I think Chuck Fletcher is aware of that. We're still going through that process. The Flyers, literally, you could lose talent at the NHL level, and we can still ice a competent team.
In the playoffs, for instance, Farabee could possibly be on the fourth line, because you don't know what line he could be on, right? So, would you want him playing? Now, of course, I think he'll be up anyway, but, I'm just saying, hypothetically, fourth line sometimes only plays 7, 8, maybe even 9 minutes a night, especially during come playoff time, because they're going to roll the more successful lines more than likely, depending on how the course of the game is going and stuff. If they're down by a few goals, what are you going to do? You're going to roll 3 lines, more than likely. Yeah. So there could be a time to where he's sitting a lot on the bench. Is he going to be the same player? It's unfair to expect that type of production from him when he's only out there, for instance, seven minutes a night, in him doing justice on the fourth line in general right now, it would do him injustice, in my opinion. He is better than a fourth line player. Farabee is a great player. He's going to be a really good player. And I'll tell you, he's going to be up here possibly as early as the weekend, maybe even next week. It's going to happen.
Exactly. It's not really about, and we talked about this earlier, Jamey, is people should expect, because the Phantoms are out of the playoffs. If they are out, they are going to call up a bunch of these kids for the playoffs. They're going to roll in a secondary team of Farabee and Frost, and they're going to have them practicing with the team, and they might get chances in the playoffs regardless. We don't know what's going to happen. There's still a little under 1/3 of the season left. That is a good amount of time, especially in the time of development and just seeing if these kids hit another level. Like, we don't know what's going to happen. What if Frost and Farabee just start catching fire at the end of the year? What if Ratcliffe starts getting better? All of a sudden he's 6'6". I know it's unlikely, but I'm just saying, we have bodies, we have talent. Just let them happen. Let it happen naturally, because it's going to happen. In my opinion, I don't see the Flyers holding back players for no reason. They want to win too, and they're closer to these players, and they're invested in all of them doing well. They don't pick their favorites like we do. They want them all to do well, because even if the player doesn't have a room on their team, if they're fantastic, they're worth more in a trade. There's always a reason for every player around you to do amazing.
There is no reason to have extra depth, is where I'm getting at, for this playoff push, this last of the playoff push. Never, God forbid, know when an injury is going to arise. It could happen in the playoffs.
I mean,
happen at any
time.
So why would Fletcher risk just saying, okay, I'm going to go with the youth, and here, God forbid, say Farabee got hurt. Now they're screwed. Now they have, a Derek Grant who could be sitting on the bench. I'm just saying, hypothetically, I'm not saying he will, who could be sitting on the bench and then come in, and take Joel's spot, and play well, until Joel's able to get healthy. I'm just using that as an example. I'm not saying it's going to happen. Nor do I wish an injury on any player. I'm just saying, injuries happen. So, and that's why I was happy. Let's get into Ghost now, because he was a big topic of conversation by a lot of people, a lot of pundits and stuff, right? And then we could talk about the overall landscape of the Metro following Ghost, but this is a perfect time to bring up Ghost for depth purposes. Yeah. Why would the Flyers, who have had two problems in the past few years, defense and goaltending, why would the Flyers risk trading a seventh defenseman now when they were in a hardcore playoff push? Would that have made any sense?
No. I know a lot of people think it does. Unless we've talked about it before, it is more of an off-season type of move. Is there a chance to switch him for a top six forward? Maybe, but again, you're kind of selling low on a player who I've made a video about this, Jamey. There's the player profile series on YouTube. If you watch that, I go specifically into Ghost's game and what is wrong with him. I refer to him as a Ferrari. Obviously, he is. If you look at all offensive defensemen, most of them will go through these periods of struggle, typically in their mid-20s, which is exactly where Ghost is, where they kind of hit a ceiling because people start reading their game and they play a risky game, so now they have to start learning the game in a way. Chuck Fletcher traded away Brent Burns years ago in a very similar position and a very similar age as Ghost, where they didn't even think that Brent Burns could play NHL at the NHL, or couldn't play defense at the NHL level. And they traded him away for a bunch of pieces, and none of them panned out to anything as good as Brent Burns. It's far better to be patient with something like Gostisbehere. Wait to see if he pans out. Anything you can get back at this trade deadline right now would be meaningless in comparison to the value he would return getting back to the point that he had for 50% of his career. Because if he gets back up even to being a 50-point defenseman, let alone a 70-point defenseman, which is what his pace was in his rookie year and then his third year, that stuff is crazy. If you can get a defenseman who does that, it's worth a lot more than the type of nonsense assets you can pick up, for whatever a half-injured defenseman would be, at a lowest time in his career. It just doesn't make sense to do it. You're better off holding on to him. At the very least, if you're going to trade him before expansion draft, and trade him in the draft if you need to, maybe to move up and get a really good young defenseman to replace him, something like that, right?
Absolutely. And that's exactly how we all operated at this site. It was unbelievable how some people around, us, including, the great, listen, I love all the fans and everything. They support us very well. And, we wouldn't be here today with credentials and everything and all this other stuff, if it wasn't for them. But some people were just unrealistic in their expectations on what Ghost's value was at the trade deadline. And Fletcher mentioned that in his presser file today after the trade deadline. And in not so many words, he did have a few teams contact him. And he said that the value, he said it wasn't worth, moving. He said he liked, a Gostisbehere anyway. And, if the right deal came along, he would have accepted it. But, in not so many words, he said that there was no value, which is how we operated for the past month in saying there's a guy, not saying he has no value. At this particular time, his value. Right, exactly.
There's no win.
Why would we trade him for a spare part? For a fourth rounder or a fifth rounder, I'm just throwing stuff out there.
I'll
even a bottom six player. Even a bottom six player
Jamey, to me. Even a late first round pick. What is a late first round pick going to do for us? One, going into a playoff run, it's definitely not going to help us do that, right? Or even a late first round pick and a prospect. Is that what we need right now? No, that's not what we need for the playoffs.
And that's exactly what he is worth at full strength. He should be worth a top six forward and possibly a prospect. Maybe a middle-end prospect.
If he's back at his top game to the point where he did for 50% of his career, he's worth a whole lot more than that. And that's kind of my point, is that he's worth more than a top six forward. If he's all the way on top of his game, we can get more than that for him. So to me, I'd rather gamble. I'd rather him, like I said earlier to you today, Jamey, I'd rather watch him fail here than watch him succeed and blossom somewhere else.
Oh, absolutely, no question.
And I brought this scenario up. People were talking about trading him to the Kings. Great. Put Shane Gostisbehere with Drew Doughty and tell me that he's not going to put up a bunch of points and make us look stupid. Like, that is almost bound to happen. So I think people need to relax. when they want to get rid of highly talented players. Players struggle. He obviously had a knee injury of some sort this year. We don't know how long that's been, whether he tweaked it early. Maybe it wasn't fine. He's had ACL surgery in the past. Doesn't mean he's broken. This stuff happens. It happens to athletes, and it happens to offensive defensemen quite often, almost like clockwork, I'd say.
His value just wasn't there. We can
go through the whole league.
Yeah.
Cam Fowler. You can go through the whole league. Every offensive defenseman has struggled. Each one of them. Erik Karlsson this year. Just keep going down the list. Just keep going.
Now the tweets and everything, they'll start the limit now, and stuff like that in terms of like going back and forth with some people and stuff saying, oh no, I think Ghost is going to move. It was unrealistic. It was just unrealistic for the return that Chuck Fletcher wanted for Shane Gostisbehere. You mentioned a really good point. You know why? You mentioned a really good point. Who did Chuck Fletcher trade during his Minnesota days?
Brent Burns, that's what I was saying.
There you go. And he wasn't going to
26 years old.
And he wasn't going to have it happen again.
And he got Jonathan Cheechoo back. Remember? Oh, Jonathan Cheechoo. Yep. I'm pretty sure he was part of that package in return. I'm pretty sure they got a first as well. I didn't even look it up today, just because I know that the idea sounds amazing, to get rid of this piece of frustration, which maybe a lot of people see as a distraction of some sort. But you have to think of it differently. It's not like the players around him see him as some kind of cancer to the room or anything. They're watching their friends struggle, who, by the way, helped carry them into the playoffs back in the day. It's not like Claude Giroux forgot that. It's not like Jake Voracek forgot these things. Right. That Shane Gostisbehere came in here and just drove this team into the playoffs. I think people need to give him a little bit of credit here and realize he's got a lot of talent. And if we can get him back on track, it's vastly worth it.
My whole thing is that we should treat Ghost the same way that we treat Nolan Patrick and Oscar Lindblom.
Right, that's what
Let's have some respect. Right? Prayers for Ghost. He obviously was struggling mentally at that. This was a great time for him to go down to Lehigh for a few games, do the conditioning stint, and then come back. And a lot of people already said, "Oh, Ghost and Cam York," I heard, and I was like, "Oh my God! Like, where did this come from?" Because we have some intel, and I know you have intel, and you pretty much have the same intel as me. So I'm like, I'm not hearing a thing because his value just wasn't there.
It's also intuition. I mean, I don't know where that rumor came from, but the whole idea of packaging Ghost and Cam York, I think, is quite frankly asinine. I don't think Cam York is going anywhere. I think, if anything, Cam York is the Ghost replacement. You're moving one of them, not both. Yeah. You're probably not moving Cam York because he's going to be very good, and there's no reason to really do that. We're not really in a position to do that. We actually should keep him because we don't know what's going to happen with the expansion draft. And quite frankly, our team is not at a point where it's a fully rolling machine. We're at the top of the league consistently putting up points. We don't know what we're going to go for. We don't know what we're going to do yet. But I would say trading Cam York would definitely be a mistake. Now, if you guys want to talk about moving into the top 5 of the draft this year, or maybe going for a top 5 pick, then you start talking about moving Cam York.
No question.
Then you talk about packaging York and Gostisbehere. If you want to try to get into a top 5 pick, that's where you start going crazy. But we weren't going crazy. That's not what's happening here. You're not picking up a superstar.
If the Devils wanted Ghost and they said, okay, we'll give you a first, I would have taken it. Not just a first, but, in a player. I probably would have taken it. They have a shot at Alexis. Oh, yeah. First round pick. First round pick in this year's draft.
Alexander Lafreniere this year. I mean, I've been following the kid for a few years. The numbers that he's producing, I think he's over 2 points a game or is around 2 points a game. This kid is astronomically talented.
No, that's what I'm saying. That's what I mean. That's a trade I would have made. That's for expected. For like Cam York or something. That's what I mean.
That's what I'm getting.
Do you know what I'm saying though?
Take like 4 first-round picks.
My thought is okay. We're going to a team that has a shot, at the first overall pick. That's exactly my mindset going in. It was never about Ghost going to a playoff contender. Why would a playoff contender like Toronto? Because you heard the same thing that I did. Not credible rumors. I'm just saying, why don't we do Ghost, to Toronto for, Kasperi Kapanen and a pick, or something of that nature.
Yeah.
Okay. In hindsight, why would Toronto come calling to Chuck Fletcher and say, yeah, I'd like Shane Gostisbehere, he said, and Fletcher says, yeah, okay. Well, give us Kasperi Kapanen and give us, a second round pick. Quick. Kyle Dubas is going to hang up. Why? Because Ghost had a knee injury.
Yeah.
Why right, exactly. This wasn't coming to Philly and saying, exactly, that's what I mean. Right, why would they take that type of gamble just off a 2-game stint down in the AHL? That would be a heck of a gamble. Who Kyle Dubas, I think, is already under the microscope anyway. I don't have definitive information into that. This is just my personal opinion, because Toronto, I think, is in a state now where they have to make the playoffs, or he may be on the chopping block himself. Man.
Yeah, man. Well, I don't know.
I mean, they changed the coach. No, I mean, this is just overall. This is not this. Yeah, like you said, it's speculation. It's there is no sources behind it, but change the coach, and you make some other.
It's Toronto. They're nuts.
A lot of pressure there.
We don't know exactly what Toronto is going to do.
What I'm saying is, there's a lot of pressure in Toronto from fans.
They're crazy.
Fans are great, and they know their team very well. And if they see their team, who should be a playoff caliber team, because at first glance, there should be no reason that team should not make the playoffs this year. So that's how, if I'm a Toronto fan, that's how I'm operating,
Well, okay, there's another example, okay? Well, I was talking about Carolina Hurricanes. Okay, Kyle Dubas, and I like Kyle Dubas, okay? I really like him.
I do too.
I think he's smart. Nice kid. I think he's talented, but I look at a team that I don't want to say he's driven off analytics or anything like that, but I do know he's tried to build his team a little differently. I don't have a problem with the talent. He's put around there a lot of talent, but look at the amount of changes that organization has gone through in the short amount of years that he's been there. And I'm not so much just riding him because it's Toronto and it's a group effort. It's not always just him, and there's a lot of pressure and everything. But all of the changes they made did not amount into a better team. Before, when they had a worse team on paper, they had a better performance. And I'm not saying that it's the product of these players. I'm not saying they're damaged. There's something wrong with them. I think quite the contrary. I think it's just too much, too many changes. Even the Capitals, they made all those changes. They kind of regressed. Then they sat on those changes, built as a team, and then won a championship. St. Louis, all those changes amounted to a team that was in chaos for a while. Then all of a sudden got good goaltending, brought it together. I think that's kind of more of a fluky thing. A lot of times you got to build as a team, as a unit. And all of these changes, they sound great, and sometimes they can pay off. But a lot of times you're disrupting a workflow, right? A team play that is kind of amassed over weeks and weeks of work and memorization and execution. And to add a bunch of new players all the time is ineffective. To add one player here or there, I think could be highly effective. But even look at Taylor Hall in Arizona, or even Phil Kessel. That is a highly defensive system, and they brought in 2 offensive guys, and it's not necessarily producing an offense the way people think it's going to produce, because it's again, it's a team play. It's a system, and it's not just bringing in one guy and expecting him to explode. You have to play around him. Yeah. Look at what happened in Edmonton when they brought in a GM who understood that. He changed the model of the team. They changed the program, and Draisaitl and McDavid are putting up insane numbers on a power play that I think is running at 30%. This is, it's a different way to play. It's a different attitude. And we're watching that change with AV and the Flyers, right? The production overall went down, right, for the whole team for a little bit. It's changing now as the team is maturing. But overall, it's a more defensive system than we were. It's more organized, so less mistakes, but also less goal scoring to some degree as well. So, it plays in the numbers, right? So it's not just the players' numbers all the time. Anyway, that's all I'm trying to say.
Oh yeah. No, I hear you. It definitely is a team, and that's why I stood behind the Flyers in terms of just doing these low key additions and standing pat the rest of the way. Just because I love the overall makeup of the team. Being around the team this year, and you know what I'm talking about, is a breath of fresh air in that locker room. That locker room is fresh and vibrant. Each time I go in it, I love it. The players are happy. And it's even, after a loss, it's not like a pin drop like it was last year, in the year before, so to speak, at times. Yeah. This year is still a little vibrant, even after a loss, not necessarily. Of course, the guys aren't happy because because nobody's happy with losing, but it's not as toxic as it was, So
sure.
let's get into
perfect segue. Yeah, segue in our next topic.
Damn right. Into the winners and losers of the Metro. You had the Caps picking up Ilya Kovalchuk. Pittsburgh picked up Jason Zucker and Patrick Marleau. The Isles picked up Pagel, Carol, and Andy Grain. Last week or the previous week?
Yeah.
Carolina picked up Trocheck and Vatanen, and the Devils traded Wayne Simmons and traded Vatanen. And they got a ton of picks, including a second, for Andy Grain.
They have a big draft ahead of them. I mean, they're probably thinking they get the first overall pick, and they have all these first-round picks. I mean, they're sitting on easy street.
Oh, and the Rangers re-signed Chris Kreider to a 7-year deal.
Yeah,
and I think it was what was it, 6 or 7 mil or 6.715?
Yeah, it was over. I think it was
something like that.
Over 7 years.
To include the Rangers and the Devils, even though the Devils are out of it, who do you think won today's trade deadline?
I
should prefer the Flyers.
I was making fun of this earlier, but I actually really like the addition of the Caps adding Ilya Kovalchuk. I'm not in love with the player, and it's not like, I wish the Flyers got him type of thing. But Ilya Kovalchuk playing with Alexander Ovechkin, it's a very interesting, and Kuznetsov, it's a very interesting combination. It could work out really well for them. I could see it happening. It also not pan out at all, at the same time. Like, the roles could compete a little bit too much. But, overall, it's like they kind of doubled up their Ovechkin. He's an older, slower version of Ovechkin, but still, it's I don't know. It's an interesting move. I really think that the winners overall, actually, it's a tough one. I don't like what Carolina did. I like it on paper, on face value. It looks cool. It's fun. Brady Shea, like, that stuff's great. I mean, it does tell me that they don't think their team is that good. And I think they're going to be stronger now for sure to some degree, at least on the back end. But I'm just not that concerned with the Carolina Hurricanes. The Pittsburgh Penguins, I think, they improved. I think the Patrick Marleau pickup is a really nice one to have him on.
And they got Connor Sheary too, I should say.
Yeah, the Connor.
And they gave up Cone.
Yeah, I mean,
He's been hurt,
they
though.
improved.
He's always hurt, but
the Zucker trade is probably going to pay off for them really well. I mean, they always put it together. They made those trades because they needed depth, and they always seem to get the right amount of depth. I don't think any of their moves I don't see anybody in the Metro Division as a clear-cut steal of this overabundance of talent where they have no weaknesses. I see two teams in the other division, in the Atlantic Division, that maybe are a step above both teams.
Boston and Tampa.
Right. I mean, on paper, you're like, okay, I don't know what weakness they have. So I would kind of look at that. Pittsburgh, you could, I guess, kind of make the same argument, and the same with Capitals. But we'll see. I mean, I think they're both flawed. I think Penguins have a tendency to not be the most disciplined team. And I think the same with the Caps now that Barry Trotz is not coach. The Islanders, if they would have completed that Parisi trade, especially, they are just a scary team because they don't make mistakes. You know what I mean?
Like, they got a really good coach over there.
Yeah, they don't make
mistakes. And a goaltender that could get hot at any time, like in Villarm. So,
but actually, you know what? I think we should. You know what? I'll wait a second, but I do want to talk about our roster. It just makes me think about Carter Hart real quick. And on paper, everybody's got a great. A lot of teams have great goaltending in our division. There's some really good goaltending in our division. Carter Hart, in my opinion, is still the most talented one right now. And yes, he's young, but that is an X factor for us, and it's important to remember because if he does go on a run, I mean, it can be scary. I don't know if a kid can do it. I don't think he can. I think he's too young. All logic says no. But having Brian Elliott right behind him, it's a really nice combination. And it's nice to have that,
I'm looking into the future here, and being that a lot of these players are rentals and stuff like that, I actually think the Devils actually won, out of the Metro, to include against the Flyers. Well, I think down the line, the Flyers are really going to have a tough time with the Devils. I think that rivalry is going to come back to where it was fierce. I mean, they have a ton of picks, to include the second-round pick for Andy Green, from the that the Isles gave up. So, not sure.
Madden as well in the trade, or did I make that up?
Not sure.
They
they traded Simmons, they traded Vatanen, and they traded Andy Green. So
yeah, but the Coleman trade, right? Because it's not.
Oh
just,
yeah, the Coleman. Yeah.
That's what I mean. Look it up real quick.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. But I actually think the Devils actually won, with the possibility of them getting Alexis Lafreniere to pair possibly. Let's just say
it's Nolan Foote. It was Nolan Foote. What a great pickup.
Oh yeah, Nolan Foote. That's right.
And
that's
a first round.
That was my fault too.
Yeah, you're not wrong, dude. It was a really nice pickup.
I just think like you're talking about getting an Alexis Lafreniere to pair with possibly Jack Hughes and Nico Hischier could be a possible line. And
or just three centers down the middle,
Do you know what I'm saying? though? I'm just saying, throwing it out there, like a possibility. I mean,
absolutely. God forbid.
So, like, God forbid. Like, and not to mention, but to pair that with all these other picks that they're going to have, holy shit! Like,
I know. God forbid, Jamey.
I think they probably have. What do they got? Like 12, 13 picks this year or something?
I don't care. I'm trying to listen. I just hope. For God forbid anybody in our division gets the first overall pick. I don't even want to think about that. I'd rather him go to Detroit so we can get Detroit out of the gutter, and that would be awesome because I hate seeing them at the bottom of the league. For some reason, it always bothers me. I think it's just because they went from this Western powerhouse to all of a sudden being in the East and now being all of a sudden at the bottom of the league. It's weird, and there's no Nicholas Lidstrom. There's just it's weird. I'm not used to seeing them be a bad team. Devils, I don't mind. I like that. They punished us enough. They deserve it for everything they did to Eric Lindros. I'm okay. I'm okay with that one. But the other one, the other stuff, Detroit, for some reason, it bothers me. Even though they beat us in a Stanley Cup, it bothers me to see them so bad. There's some good pieces, but if they get Lafreniere, they play him with what's his name, with Larkin. Like, are you kidding me? Like, the amount of speed that they could throw at teams, if that line is mature together, like. Just forget it. So that would be great, and get them out of our division. They're really bad. I would prefer it goes to them.
I mean, I just see that rivalry. It could be like 2 or 3 years away. But I just see that rivalry. just coming back again. And you're going to think that Jack Hughes is going to have another few years under his belt. He's going to be a very good player just because he is still forming today as we speak or something of that nature. It doesn't mean anything. Same thing with Nico Hischier. Doesn't mean anything. Each prospect develops at their own rate. It doesn't matter where they're drafted and stuff. Not everybody's a Connor McDavid. Not everybody is a Wayne Gretzky. And stuff like that. Not everybody's Sidney Crosby or Evgeny Malkin.
Jamey, we got a few minutes left here. I think we have one topic left, right? We got projecting the lines.
All right, so the lines for tomorrow, I think, are G. Coots forward check, and I got the second line is JVR, Hayes, TK, Grant, Lawton, Pitlick, and Raffle, Thompson, NAK, and of course, Haig is staying in, and because Ghost and Patrick are extras today at practice.
Yep.
So.
Well, it's interesting. I'm not sure exactly what they're doing with Ghost, right? But I guess my prediction for the lines, I could see JVR staying with that Lawton Pitlick line just because they produce so well. I think obviously the top line will stay together. I can see Grant being tried out with Hayes and Konechny. He's put up some points this year. He's left-handed. He's got really good size. He's 6'3". Konechny's pretty small. We'll see if he can keep up with them. If not, they can always slide up somebody like Raffle. You can always get Lawton back up there and move Grant into the third line center spot. There are definitely some options there still. I do, talent-wise, like Farabee back, obviously not left wing, but, for the most part, I would be pretty satisfied with either Lawton or Grant being up there for the game. And then, the last line, with Bunneman out, like you said, you got to assume that it'll be NAK, Thompson, and, some combination of Raffle.
Quick before the show ends, do you see Grant taking over the third line center role for Scott Lawton at some point or no?
I think it depends on
until Patrick gets healthy, I should say. Until Patrick gets cleared for contact and whatnot. Do you think Grant at some point, because the Flyers don't necessarily like Scott Lawton as center?
I think the potential is there because he's bigger than Scott Lawton. He's got really good size, and Scott Lawton has good chemistry with Kevin Hayes. So that's why I was thinking, if you do want to try, that's why I suggested trying Grant out first, because then you can swap Grant and Lawton as third line center and second line wing, left wing. You can kind of play with that combination there without disrupting your lines too much. And if Grant's able to do everything, which I believe he is, because right now they're going to be used kind of the same way, right? If Patrick comes back, that is a game changer. Probably NAK comes out realistically, or maybe Thompson comes out, and then one of those guys plays a fourth line or whatever combination. So if that happens towards the playoff, otherwise I do agree with you. I think it'd be Grant or Lawton will kind of play around with that third line center spot. And I think that's what they brought him in for, is they have that option now. They have that other guy that they can rotate in there. Maybe they would want more of a pure center, but, probably would have been more expensive, realistically.
Well, Flyer fans, it's all we got for tonight. This was a great show. It was great with my comrade, Yariv Wolok. We're featured on FlyersNittyGritty.com. You can find our YouTube channel. We also have a Facebook page as well. Hit us up on that. We got a lot of stuff cooking in terms of prospects coming up. We got a lot of prospect interviews. Actually, I have a prospect interview coming this week with Jaco Perreault, who is a first-round draft target for the Philadelphia Flyers. So look forward to that. And your Reef also has some more videos popping out, and we got some good content, coming. What do you think, your Reef?
Yeah, man. Honestly, we're going to try to do more content. This is our first podcast episode. We're going to do more video content. I have the Gritty Rant series, the player profile series. Jamey does the pregame. We're probably going to do more postgame stuff. Obviously, we have our writers. Follow our writers. They do not agree with us on everything. We don't all have one holistic view, but we don't concern ourselves with that. We don't tell our writers what to think. They're allowed to think and believe anything they're allowed to believe, and we talk about that all the time. We're not here to tell them what to think or how to feel about the things they feel. They're here to represent that side of the audience as well. This is Jamey and I started this together, and this is kind of the vision that we put out. We believe in the organized, measured way of looking about things, and we see it. Look at the results. Look at the video that I made. Look at the article that Jamey made. Look how closely that aligns with what the Flyers actually did. Despite all the chaos and all the craziness that you guys hear, there is a more measured approach. A lot of the rumors you hear are people picking up the phone and calling because they're inquiries. An inquiry, a question, a conversation does not mean the player is getting moved. Trades take time. A lot of these trades, they take months, sometimes 12, 18 months. This Zach Parise trade rumor we heard today, that is probably the beginning of a trade that will probably finish in the summertime. And then you'll know it's been working on for months. We probably weren't even supposed to hear about it. And this is the type of stuff that we're going to hear. It's more of an off-season deal, This is our vision. This is how we try to approach, and, we hope to be as accurate as we can be. And we're going to keep making content. We hope that you guys love it because we love making it.
Yeah, you stole the words out of my mouth. We definitely wouldn't be here without your support today, y'all. And we want to introduce our podcast, and it should be released next week or the following week after that. And the title is Gettin Gritty Wit It. And that was a name by Yariv. So that's a hell of a name. And, where I'm getting at is we wouldn't be here without all your support today. And we know that. And even though we may disagree at times, we're not always going to agree. You could have your own opinions. It doesn't mean that I think it's stupid or whatever else. If it happens, sometimes our opinion doesn't come out. But we could agree to disagree, but we'll do it respectfully. With that, love you all. You all take care.
Thanks, guys.